everybody, and welcome to Oxrail. So, I've got a couple of things just to let you guys know before you start enjoying the railways too much. Some of you already have. There's a raffle for all of you to enjoy and raffle prizes, so go check that out. There's food available out there if you want food, and of course there is the vintage bus service. There are 12 layouts, I believe, and traders, so plenty of stuff for you to look at. It's not just in this room, it's over there as well. So welcome. For those of you who know me, I'm Lawrie. I do YouTube stuff, so you'll be able to see a video of this show afterwards to see the stuff you might not have seen. And with that, enjoy the show, guys.
As well as being the so-called special guest and opening the show, I was also exhibiting Scole, and you might remember this little NCB Sentinel shunter that I opened a few years ago on a live stream that my friends bought for me, which then didn't run very well and has since done nothing on the channel. So I thought it was long overdue coming out and doing things. And helping out and exhibiting next door to me was my friend Lozz with his micro layout Thistledew, which you might remember was part of the micro layouts that we took to the Staffold Barn Railway's Model Railway show a few years ago. First up at Oxrail was something that I have never seen modelled before. This is Bristol Goods Shed in 7mm, and it is modelling Brunel's broad gauge. Yes, the 7-foot wide tracks used by the Great Western Railway. This was absolutely fascinating, and not just content with having to scratch build their own locomotives, stock and track, they made this multi-gauge where the standard gauge, or narrow gauge for the Great Western fans, met the broad gauge, and you would have the transfer of goods between the two. Seeing this modelled was absolutely incredible because it gives you a sense of just how big the broad gauge was, and it's something so uncommon because none of it survives. We have a few replicas over at Didcot, but being able to see how a transfer shed would have worked and the sheer scale of the locomotives and wagons that were being used makes you really appreciate this gauge and wonder just what the railways would have been like if we'd adopted Brunel's gauge rather than Stephenson's. It was absolutely amazing, and again, just the sheer amount of work that's gone into this for the research and the fact that nearly everything that was running had to be scratch built. There was one other party piece that the layout had, and that was shunting by chain on the adjacent line, and I just thought that was really cool. Meanwhile, over on Scole, I was also doing some shunting. But moving away from the complexities of that was this Austrian HO layout with a name that I cannot even begin to pronounce. It was a modern era with an overhead catenary, which I really like, and what I liked even more was this was a mix of HOE, or 009 narrow gauge, and HO together, and I always love it when you have the two different gauges integrated together on one layout. This represented somewhere in the pre-Alps with a tourist narrow gauge railway working its way up and a mainline station with the odd train that would come in and pause for passengers to alight onto the heritage service. As I don't know much about Austrian railways, I always find Continental layouts very interesting, seeing the different designs of locomotive, stock and infrastructure, and this layout really did not disappoint, with regular trains and lots going on.
It's a train which doesn't stop in a small station like this, so it runs through. Typical connection for that was Vienna, Munich, things like that. Extremely comfortable seats, so there were only 3 seats in the row. That's why I really love this train.
You're taking photos? does the train go past? Here.
Oh, sorry.
Over on Scole, I was enjoying operating my tiny model railway, but I suspect over on Memory Lane, they were enjoying themselves a lot more because they were running Dublo, and I'm sure most of you by now know how much I love good old school 3-rail Hornby Dublo. It's absolutely wonderful. It's a proper toy with a real chunky quality, and I love watching it trundle around. The noise of the wagons and everything is just superb. They also had this converted Triang Hymek running like the one I unboxed the other day, and the controllers were open for the kids to be able to have a go and operate a model railway, and I thought that was a wonderful touch and shows just how durable Dublo is, that it can take somebody who's less experienced, giving it full power and then throttling it back down suddenly, and Dublo just keeps on going, being used by kids and adults alike, and I thought that was wonderful. 70 odd years later, it's still doing exactly what it was meant to do. At the other end of the scale from the main line of Dublo, I was happy shunting wagons in the middle of nowhere on Scole, just like Oozwell in 00 gauge, modelled on the Wisbech and Upwell Tramway, a tramway which has captured the hearts of millions with these quirky J70 tram locomotives and tramway cars, with stations which were just stops in the middle of nowhere and serving the rural communities of the Fens. It was an amazing network full of short sidings where wagons would be dropped off for local produce to be loaded up and then collected on return trains. As the railway, or the tramway, followed the road for most of its route, all the locomotives had to be fitted with cow catchers and side skirts because they were so close to the public. It is an iconic railway, and seeing it modelled so well is just intoxicating. And with the J70 moving its train out of the way, a sentinel could appear and shunt its own train. And speaking of sentinels and shunting, I was still happily mucking around with Scole. Opposite was Poffin Colliery in 009, located somewhere in the Welsh countryside, representing the transfer yard between a coal mine's narrow gauge railway and the standard gauge. Back on Scole, I'd completed every movement I could with the Sentinel and had swapped it out for a Terrier. Up next was one of the most visually stunning layouts I think I have ever seen. This was Tony's Forest in 014 gauge, representing a narrow gauge railway running through a forest, and the amount of different fauna and all of the effort to make this look like a real woodland was absolutely mental. It was stunning. The trees had texture, the grounds had texture, and different wildflowers, the broken trees and branches. It honestly looked real, and there were moments looking through it as you peered through the trays as the railway was set towards the back, and here that you can almost believe that this is actually a real scene with the realistic flowers and plants in the background. It was absolutely outstanding. I was blown away by just how good it looked. Also, there was a great variety of locomotives and rolling stock running, but the pièce de résistance was this, a working loader filling up the hoppers. I love it when there's functional industry on a layout. This was brilliant. And then there was another railway hidden up behind the loader as well.
Do you want to take a picture? You just, the sun is coming out of there.
Feeling a bit scenically bare, I was still shunting with the Terrier on Scole. And over on Todd Morton, they were doing some shunting as well, but this time in N scale. This is a terminus of the Midland Railway sometime in the BR days. Steam is starting to come to an end and being replaced by diesel traction. I was interested to see how shunting actually worked in N scale, as I've never had any luck with it. And it was quite fascinating watching things being moved about on the layout. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to me, my Sentinel had obviously got the taste of being used and had gone off on adventure, ending up on Bristol Goods Shed, trundling around on the O gauge section of the line, looking entirely appropriate for the Great Western Railway. Leaving the Sentinel to its own devices, we come across perhaps my favourite layout of the show, the Little Himalayan Railway in 009. This beautifully captures the feel of the famous Darjeeling Railway, with so many of the line's key features, like crossing over the roads and of course the famous switchbacks in order to get higher up the mountain. What's remarkable about this setup is it's built as a spiral, with the trains working their way up the mountain quite literally until they reach the fiddle yard at the top. It's an absolute joy to watch operating, and I never thought you could capture something as big and grand as Darjeeling in such a tiny space. I just thought it was absolutely fabulous. It was fun to watch and just bursting with character. It's brilliant. Keeping with 009, to keep things interesting over on Thistledew, Lozz had turned a locomotive around. This was quite a similar setup to our next layout that I'm not going to attempt to pronounce its name in HOE, which was a larger affair of the challenge of making a 009 layout in a tiny space, with a baseboard for this one starting life as a canvas painting that was retrieved from a skip.
Has anybody got luncheon vouchers that they didn't use?
Very nice. So, end of the day, get yourself packed up.
Back on Scole, I'd done everything that I could with the Terrier and had broken out the pannier tank, and at the other end of the scale was Thistledew in Z gauge, which is one of the smallest commercial gauges that you can get, and was running a variety of DMUs around the layout, and features items from many different countries. On the larger scale but significantly smaller layout Scole, I was still shunting. With my love of old things, Bossington really interested me. This layout was built for the first Oxrail exhibition way back in 1964 and is still operating today with the original locomotives and stock, and that makes me really happy. The idea that this old layout that's been superseded by newer and more detailed models is still out on the exhibition circle, bringing joy to people who watched it. I just think that's brilliant. They could have replaced it all with modern stuff. They could have replaced the engines with modern stock, but no, it's as it was built, as it was designed. Yes, the track's been upgraded and replaced, and yes, it's had a load of work, but it's still got the same heart of a layout built in 1964. And it made me wonder, I wonder how many other layouts this old are still on the exhibition circuit. I mean, Scole's no spring chicken, it had almost a decade in retirement. And at the other end of the scale was Port Hallow reimagined in 009, which was still being built. I loved the way the railway wound its way through all of the unique different buildings. This had a real charm to it and really felt like a seaside town. And I'm always a sucker for anything that's got a harbour scene anyway. Having shunted every conceivable move on Scole, me and Lozz went to check out a layout that we had a vested interest in. This is the 009 Society's modular layout, and as we recently built and displayed a modular, we were really excited to have a look at how these guys had done theirs. The big difference between theirs and ours was each module on this was its own identity. The scenery was different, the textures, the landscape, they were very much individual boards that all went together. So your narrow gauge train went on a much more varied journey, literally travelling to different countries, which meant it was a real visual treat, seeing all the different techniques and the different parts of the world that were represented. And the module itself was far more busy than our own, with more passing places and more trains moving at any one time. It was also interesting seeing the different standards of modelling. It was all superb, but some of it was absolutely stand out. And of course, just like ours, it could be taken apart, disassembled and reassembled in a different way, meaning that every show it goes to, it can be set up in a different way, meaning it's a new layout for people to enjoy.
I can actually look at it while I'm driving on Google.
If I was starting when I was small now,
It does work for nights. You've seen it.
now either we use magnet or some of the trust.
Well, only on one.
Are they hiring Barry?
So you haven't really got time for that.
Joy or other is that you
Because it's a mini.
My last task of the day was an important one. I got to choose the winners of the raffle, which meant I got to spin the spinny thing and pull the numbers out and call them out.
Next up, number 536 in the light colours. And so that brings us to the end of the day here at Oxrail. And I'm here with a 1-to-1 scale owl, courtesy of Owls Owls. Now these guys rescue owls and rehome them and look after them. So, yes, amazing this 1-to-1 scale. The motors that go into this to make it work, it's just lifelike. It's incredible. And the texture, it's amazing. Anyway, thank you all very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this. If you have enjoyed this, how about clicking somewhere over there for some other model railway shows. And with that, I'm going to, I don't really know what one does with an owl. I believe that I'm now a tree. So that's it. Ta-ra. That's the most dismissive look I've ever had from an owl.
He doesn't give two hoots what you're saying.